Our next presenter is Holly Teichholtz. She's Senior Vice President of Communications for the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research. So she's working in the nonprofit world. She oversees the foundation's efforts to tell the story of how it is tangibly speeding progress toward a cure for Parkinson's disease. So she's leading a team that has to translate very complex subject matter, technical, medical, scientific information into compelling, relatable words and images. And she will also talk about how they're doing that through media relations, multimedia, photography, imagery, and how in particular they are tying their brand pillars of the foundation to their communications and their expressions for their various audiences. So please join me in welcoming Holly Teichholtz.
Thank you so much, Irene. Hi. I was sort of looking forward to that break in the sense that I find the law enforcement officer such a tough act to follow. I shared with Dean last night at dinner, my stepfather was a decades-long veteran of the Washington, D.C. and Boston police departments, and I just have such immense respect for the work that you do, and I know how challenging it is. So thank you so much for having me. I want to thank Irene and Alan in particular. It's an honor to be on the roster today. This is a topic so close to my heart. I gave my talk today the title, What Do Research Funders Owe People Living with Disease? I hate to keep an audience in suspense, so I'm going to just jump straight to the end and share with you that our foundation thinks we owe people living with Parkinson's disease a great deal, and the very short reason for that is that we can't achieve our mission without their help. And what I want to do today is share how we work to bring clarity to our communications to patients and families and persuade them that while they clearly have a major stake in our work, they also have an immense opportunity to be part of the solution to Parkinson's disease. So I wanted to just start with some brief background on Parkinson's. It's the second most common neurodegenerative disease after Alzheimer's. It's the 14th leading cause of death in the United States. People are familiar with some of the symptoms: tremor, maybe stiffness, slowness of movement. There are many. There's a huge array of other symptoms that are not well treated by the therapies that we have today. I said it's second most common after Alzheimer's, just to put that in context. So it's hard to come by really good source stats, but we think there are 1 million people living with Parkinson's disease in the United States and 5 million worldwide. Compare that to Alzheimer's, which is 5 million in the United States and 30 million worldwide. So there's quite a gap there. Parkinson's is a highly complex disease. It's a good subject for a conference on the crisis of complexity. It's highly individualized. Doctors and researchers and patients will tell you if you've met one person with Parkinson's, you've met one person with Parkinson's. It manifests and progresses and really just behaves very, very differently from one patient to the next. We don't have a cure for Parkinson's disease. The gold standard treatment that we do have was discovered in 1967. And it addresses only some of the symptoms. It becomes less effective over time, and it brings pretty seriously disabling side effects for many. So we still have a lot of work to do funding as Parkinson's research funders. Michael J. Fox launched our foundation in 2000 after sort of assessing the landscape of national Parkinson's organizations and seeing that there were actually many organizations doing very worthwhile work in direct services to patients, advocacy, education, but none exclusively focused on driving research toward a cure. Parkinson's research was a bit of a sleepy field at the time. There was a lot of hope put into stem cells. Stem cell work continues. It hasn't proved a silver bullet. We are often described in the media as being not a typical celebrity charity. I don't know what a typical celebrity charity would be, but presumably that term is not meant as a compliment. Michael is an iconic celebrity, but he's also a person living with Parkinson's disease. That's not a role he's playing. And being a patient-founded organization informs everything we do. He came at it with what he now calls a startup mentality. He sourced his co-founder, my boss, Debbie Brooks, from the world of finance, a career at Goldman Sachs. And so neither of them came into it with a sort of history of in the scientific enterprise or the nonprofit world, and they kind of will say now they didn't know what they didn't know, and that was probably a blessing in disguise because they kept a very open mind about really just how well the research enterprise as a whole functions to meet patients' needs. And sometimes that means it doesn't function very well to meet patients' needs. Since that time, we have funded over $600 million in Parkinson's research, including about $90 million last year. We're obsessed with efficiency and cost. 89 cents of every dollar that we spend goes to our programmatic research efforts. And very much a product of Michael's personality, his get-it-done approach, his very famous optimism. We think of ourselves as optimistic problem solvers toward a cure. And what we're trying to do is create appealing and kind of turnkey solutions to some of the biggest challenges we face in Parkinson's research and drug development. Our ultimate goal really is to find the cure and go out of business, close our doors. Anyone who's been involved in communicating highly technical material, as neurobiology tends to be, knows that some of the just communication challenges just go across all of science. We do have some specific challenges that face us as communicators in neurodegenerative brain disease and some specific to Parkinson's. So there remains a stigma around Parkinson's disease, and that leads to people hiding. People can hide sometimes for as many as several years. Michael himself lived with Parkinson's disease for 7 years before he shared his diagnosis with the public and retired from what he thought he was doing was retiring from his acting career. It turned out he was retiring from Spin City. The disease is a slow-moving one. It progresses very slowly over the course of years. It's not seen as it's not a death sentence. It's not a cancer diagnosis. It's not an Alzheimer's diagnosis, which can actually lead, which is a good thing in a lot of ways, and yet at the same time, there can be a lack of urgency around making an action plan and deciding that there are some actions that you might want to take. And I'll just, a quick anecdote on that. Even, you might think, well, what kinds of actions? And I'll certainly talk more about that, but one of the things we know, both anecdotally and from surveys that we and others have conducted, is that even an action that seems as simple as getting to the right kind of doctor for your disease, which in Parkinson's happens to be a movement disorder specialist, it's a subspecialty trained neurologist, 2/3 of Parkinson's patients never take that step. Many are treated by primary care physicians, many are treated by community neurologists, and one of our most cherished messages and calls to action is to help educate patients that they may be able to live better with their disease if they see a doctor who really specializes and may see, for example, 10 Parkinson's patients a day instead of 10 a week or 10 a month. I mentioned it's highly variable among patients, and that creates another challenge for us as communicators in the sense that there isn't a one-size-fits-all answer or action plan that applies to everyone with Parkinson's disease. I'm talking today, of course, mainly about how we work with our patient and family audience. Of course, an additional layer of kind of tactical complexity to what we do comes from the fact that we do have multiple audiences, be that the patients themselves, the researchers that we fund and work with and partner with, policymakers and regulators, certainly the pharmaceutical industry, and clarity means different things to all of these different groups. We really take a storytelling approach to our communication strategy. We tell a lot of different kinds of stories. But as a research organization, no matter what kind of story we're telling or which audience we're addressing, it's really paramount that we maintain both empathy and scientific credibility with each of these groups. And sometimes those things can be a little bit at odds with each other. This sort of challenge, this key challenge has really been the jumping off point for the development of our brand voice. And I should mention that the foundation launched in 2000, and I've been with the foundation since 2005. So this has been a lot of my work over the last 10 years. So as we think about the audience and the story that we're telling, and we think about trying to bring a clear and consistent voice to our messages, we've worked to evolve this voice that rests on these pillars. And, I mentioned it's a topic so close to my heart because really, if you look at these pillars of what we think of as the pillars of our brand voice, really all of them are related or directly, sometimes synonymous with clarity, sort of being the highest goal that we're always reaching for, and we don't always make it. We try, but that's so these pillars that we always strive for: excellence. So to us, that means high quality journalistic inquiry on whatever topic that is authoritative but never arrogant. Simplicity, of course, we always must avoid oversimplification of highly technical material. Directness, so this is one of, I think, the most cherished elements of our brand voice to the patient audience, because we speak plainly and we never sugarcoat. We're not in the business of trying to sell something that either isn't looking as promising as it once was, or that others may be trying to sell as a silver bullet. We don't sugarcoat these things. We want the patients to be active partners in understanding how far we've come and how much work we have to do. And authenticity. So never overpromising, and also never biased. So why does this all matter? It matters because patient involvement really is an essential ingredient if we're going to get better drugs onto market. Unfortunately, few take part in research, and that's really what I'm talking about here. So we're a foundation, and we make no bones about the fact that we're in the business of raising money in order to fund more research. But our calls to action to the patient community go well beyond the financial. So one of the most critical factors, and it's a big problem in Parkinson's disease and accelerating progress, is that we need to increase patient participation in research, engagement. And this is really something that is happening in Parkinson's and happening across the life sciences right now, this question of how do you amplify the patient voice, bring the patient and researcher communities together in a dialogue, so that patients' needs can actually more fully inform the research that we're trying to do and the questions that we're trying to answer about disease. I mean, one of the things that's challenging about research is researchers have to work on answering the questions that they're able to ask. And so how do you source better questions in order to be asking the questions that really are relevant to patients' needs and quality of life, and really many unmet needs that still exist in PD. So engagement work is, of course, a challenge no matter what field you're in, and at the Fox Foundation, our goal really is almost never to raise awareness. Like, we kind of think of that as the last refuge of scoundrels at the Fox Foundation. We're working to motivate and change behavior, and that's our goal. We have specific business goals on every communications plan that we launch. They vary, but we always know what we're trying to do, and we are measuring to see how close we got to doing it. So the positive news about this engagement challenge is that across the life sciences now, technologies are emerging that are making it, that are not only making it possible for more patients to participate in research in greater and greater numbers, but maybe creating a lot of enthusiasm as well about this. So, just thought I would run through a couple of specific examples of how we're working on this. We see it as our obligation to develop these technologies for the purposes of speeding a cure for Parkinson's. So, for example, we're partnering with Intel on a partnership to essentially make it possible to gather and store patient-contributed data at scale, and then make that de-identified data available to researchers for independent study. And of course, that requires developing the algorithms to actually glean some insights about Parkinson's and know what questions you're trying to answer, and can this data help us answer it. So that's a partnership that we launched in 2014 that's ongoing. Some of the emerging technologies that are helping us are as simple as Facebook. So we have pilot efforts underway to use social media to recruit for clinical trials that desperately need patients. So it's early days on this, but we have some early data that shows us that that a simple and targeted Facebook ad can reach potential trial participants faster and at a fraction of the typical recruitment cost. So it's not unusual in pharma to see a company pay up like $1,000 to get somebody into a trial. We've been able to get people very far along this funnel. We haven't completed the life cycle one time yet, but very far along this funnel, it's looking very promising that we might be able to get people into our landmark trial for $35 a piece, which is basically free. We have a virtual study called Fox Insight. So this is kind of a survey and maybe wearables-based approach. Again, allowing thousands of patients, they may never set foot in a sort of brick and mortar traditional clinical trial, but they can answer surveys and questions and use their wearables. I mean, I'm wearing my Apple Watch today. We're all excited about wearables, and this is kind of the big trend and exciting thing that's happening, and it's happening in disease research as well. We have 4,000 people enrolled in Fox Insight, which is a tool that we launched in early 2015. But all of these are wonderful, but technology actually can never really take the place of traditional brick and mortar trial participation. Again, I mentioned this is sort of a chronic problem in Parkinson's, so we know historically that about 1 in 10 Parkinson's patients will ever participate in a trial. It's probably not that many more who ever even think about participating in a trial. We created a tool in 2012. It's called Fox Trial Finder. We sort of, with love, we call it the Match.com of Parkinson's clinical trials. You put a medical history in, and as much as you want to, and it's all, it's HIPAA. It's not HIPAA compliant because it's not related to HIPAA in that way, but we've built it to the standards of HIPAA for privacy's sake, and you tell it as much as you want to tell it about your own course with Parkinson's. Controls can use this too. And you become a registered volunteer, and then the clinical coordinators who are sort of understaffed and under-resourced to find folks can actually go in when they have a trial that they're trying to recruit for. Maybe they're trying to recruit a very particular kind of person. They can go in and find you. Similarly, you can go in and find them. So to come back to my thesis statement, if we're asking patients and families for their engagement and their contributions in these ways, we think we owe them at the very least appealing tools and sustained and consistent and clear communication of the opportunities that they actually have to contribute to better outcomes, certainly for the collective, and anecdotally probably even for themselves as individuals. The problem is that these are such kind of off-putting calls to action on some level. They feel unfamiliar, and it's hard, in many cases, just kind of penetrating through a wall to help people understand that these opportunities exist. It's really challenging, and so I sort of, empathize with my team a little bit and feel like we talk about how this is sort of like the opposite of like, if you build it, they will come. It's like you build it, and then you just keep trying to get them to come. So that puts us in the position of, obviously, alongside creating these tools, obviously trying to create simple and effective marketing tools that can hopefully be clear and disarming and make this feel appealing and sort of showcase the opportunity that does exist. So I just have like a minute long. We do a series of whiteboard videos, and I thought I would just show like 1 minute of one. We, as a side note, we created this with a Parkinson's patient who sits on our 25-person patient council, and it's his voice that you'll hear in the narration.
Developing new drugs is like running a long-distance race with a few hurdles thrown in for good measure. The good news is, it's a relay race. We're not running on our own. And for the first leg, we have a pretty big team. Government funders, academic scientists, research foundations, biotech, and pharmaceutical companies. This is where we take the aha moments around the first curve and into the middle stages of lab research. That initial stretch can take more than a decade and tens of millions of dollars. Even then, most new drug candidates never make it out of the lab. But a few, with the right stuff and sufficient funding, stay on course for the handoff to the next team of researchers, who then have to clear a tough but necessary hurdle: carefully designed human clinical trials. And this is where the relay team needs fresh legs, because for this part of the journey, the only racers who can grab the baton are people like us. Us means people who have Parkinson's, but also people who don't. Family members, friends, we're all needed to help complete the next stage of the race.
So I'm drawing to my conclusion, and I hope that I have sort of somewhat made the case that patients and families certainly are owed, at the very least, clear communications about the actions that they can take for living well with disease. Our highest goal always in our communication is ensuring that we are towing a very clear line between hope and hype, and helping patients do the same. We're trying to give them some power and some control to understand what actions are available to them, and then to choose the ones that make sense for them. We're optimistic, but we're also realistic. We certainly owe context around, part of giving this clarity is providing the right kind of context. And I think that our work, just in conclusion, really aligns with the sort of 3 principles of clarity outlined in Irene and Alan's book. I think no matter which audience we're talking to or which story we're telling, for us, it comes down to empathizing with patients and families and meeting them where they are, distilling their input, making their needs understood in a way that's accessible to researchers, and vice versa, by the way, and clarifying understanding on both sides to inform and set research priorities. So Thank you so much for having me. It's been really a pleasure to share this with you and to learn from all of you today, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Muhammad Ali suffers from Parkinson's.
That's right.
So I'm wondering if there's been any research, if there's a connection between CTE and Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, absolutely. So by the way, just a note on Muhammad Ali. So Michael says that if he ever wants to be invisible, he walks into a room with Muhammad Ali. So there is ongoing research into the connection between, a lot of people would really like to find a connection between sort of what Muhammad Ali did for a living and the fact that he now, is living with Parkinson's disease. There really isn't a clear research connection at this point, specifically with Parkinson's. And, I think the NFL has become obviously increasingly aware and is now really putting serious resources behind funding more research to kind of help us understand that connection. But unfortunately, and there are some things that just seem so clear, like there must be a connection. Like if you're, getting concussions and hit in the face, or if you're having certain, we'll see clusters of Parkinson's disease, and it feels there must be some environmental factor in those cases that we haven't isolated yet. It's just one of the frustrating things. We haven't made those clear connections yet, but work is ongoing. Thanks. Thank you. Oop. One more.
Much that has been a priority in your communications, as well as the results you've seen in being able to reach people through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to be clear about this, there's I don't know, it's got to be 20 years old now, certainly, but these things take a while to take hold. So this movement about it's people with Parkinson's, not Parkinson's patients. We spend a lot of time thinking about that and working to make that consistent across our communications. And one of the things that we do is we talk to our patient council about that a lot. I've been really surprised. Some of the members of and you notice it's called the patient council, and that was a vote taken by that group. So many of the members of our patient council have shared with us, and these are people very close. So this is a group of 25 people that convene at the Fox Foundation twice a year and are sort of highly kept up to date on research and programmatic strategy and fundraising strategy and help inform the actions that we're taking. And this topic comes up every couple of years when we notice that either patient is sneaking into some of our stuff, or we're hearing more patients actually refer to themselves as patients, and we just kind of try to take a temperature. For us, I think, I come from a background, I've done, my 20-year career communication, 20-year career has all been in sort of science communications. I've been at MIT, I've been at the Rockefeller University, and to me it's just such a, it's like I'm just so used to people first. And that's something that I trained my team on, and a senior member of my team has a similar background at NIH. So this is something that we think about a lot, and it's just the only, so I do think that there's a lot of different opinions about this among people living with disease, and that's actually that's a challenge. It's one of the hardest things, because sometimes we feel like we can't get it right for everybody all the time, but it's absolutely something that we keep in mind and keep tabs on as well as we can. Do I have time for one more?
And I'd love to draw a straight line between our communication strategy and impact when it's a good impact, but I don't really want to own it when we haven't had impact, right? So I'm just kind of curious for you, what are your measures of whether these approaches are working relative to the organization's goals and kind of the broader movement?
Absolutely. So, this is so interesting, again, as more and more of what we do becomes digital and actually does become trackable, right? So I mentioned that we consider raising awareness kind of the last refuge of scoundrels. There's almost nothing we ever even do, for example, on our blog that doesn't have some clear call to action, even if the kind of engagement we're trying to draw is just an email capture. Certainly with our larger initiatives, we're measuring our impact, depending on the business goals of that project. So, product launches are, a good place to really know what you're trying to do. And when we launched Fox Trial Finder in 2012, it was really hard to know. There wasn't a tool like that. It was really hard to know what was sort of a realistic goal, like in the first month or 6 months or year, like how many people were we trying to get into that tool? It's been launched since 2012, and I'll just mention that we're up to about 55,000 registered users on that tool now. My boss, of course, said to me, if we can't get 10,000 people in that tool in the first month, we're just not doing our jobs. And I was like, okay, where did you pull that number from? So we try to sort of balance it's hard to know when you don't have context, but we certainly measure what we think is working. And the tools that we're pulling together, the sort of variables for us are like, is this a Michael level sort of moment? Is there sort of an earned media moment that would merit his participation? Is there, we have built a marketing team now actually from the ground up. Shout out to my colleague who might be here, but who has come in and joined us in 2014 and built this like a discrete marketing function for the first time at the Fox Foundation, really from the ground up. What are we doing in terms of digital marketing? What are we actually seeing in terms of if the business goal is to launch a tool and get people into it, to stick with that example. So we put Michael that time, we knew that we just wanted to get the widest possible awareness of the tool and then see what came of that. We put him on, this was a luxury. We don't use him for a lot of things. I know it's easy to stand up here and say, oh, well, we just use Michael, but we actually do this only for sort of the most high priority initiatives. So we put him on a national broadcast opportunity, and we paired that with an online opportunity with Yahoo, because this is an online tool. And for example, in that case, we saw 1,000 people flood into the registration in the first 24 hours. So that's the kind of thing we're measuring, that we're thinking, okay, so you can get 1,000 people in 24 hours if you put Michael on Diane Sawyer. So what does that tell us about how we should be building? So 3 years later, we launched Fox Insight. Our goal there is to have 8,000 people in that tool after the first year and a half. So we're learning as we go what we think the reasonable business goals are in the context of our own tools that we've already built. And we're measuring how close we're coming to, again, depending on what the goal is. Sometimes there is a financial call to action, and we're looking at how we're doing on raising funds out of a particular announcement. But the business goals vary, and we're always measuring. Thank you.